They didn't even make it past the doorway. My mother's suitcase tipped sideways onto the hardwood floor, the wheels still spinning as if the house itself had rejected her return. My father stood behind her, one hand still on the handle of the front door, his mouth opening and closing without sound. They were staring at the living room, at the hospital bed, at the oxygen machine humming low and steady where my father's leather recliner used to be, at my sister, and then at me. My mother's voice came out in a whisper that didn't belong to her. No, this can't be happening. She took one step forward, her eyes scanning the IV stand, the medical charts clipped neatly to a board, the stack of envelopes on the coffee table. My father's face lost all color. "What did you do?" he asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because none of it made sense to them, not the silence, not the order, not the way the house no longer felt like theirs. And that was the point. A month earlier, the house had been quiet in a different way. Heavy. Like grief was already sitting in the corners waiting for something worse. My parents stood in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact with each other, with me with Lily. Lily was at the table wrapped in a blanket, even though it was late spring. Her hands trembled slightly around a mug she hadn't touched. My mother finally spoke. "I think we all need some space." It sounded rehearsed. My father nodded quickly, too quickly. "This environment, it's not healthy. Not for any of us." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed still in my off-duty clothes. I had been home less than a week. "Space," I repeated. No one answered right away. Lily gave a small, tired smile like she was trying to make it easier for them. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'll be fine." That was Lily, always the one smoothing things over. My mother reached for her purse. "We've already booked the trip," she said. "It's just for a little while, a reset." "Where?" I asked. "Europe," my father said like it was a reasonable detail. "Italy, France, a few places." "For how long?" There was a pause. "A month." The word sat in the room like something rotten. I looked at Lily. She was staring at the table now, her fingers tightening around the mug. "You're leaving," I said slowly, "for a month." My father's jaw tightened. "You just got back," he said. "You can handle things here, you're capable." He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like an excuse. My mother avoided my eyes. "We'll check in," she added quickly. "Of course we will." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Her dialysis schedule just increased," I said. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I know my mother said too fast. "And the insurance situation is still a mess." "We left you the documents," my father cut in. "Everything's organized." Everything's organized. Like it was a business trip. Like Lily was a set of files. I straightened, my voice steady. "You're really doing this?" Neither of them answered directly. My mother picked up her purse again. "We need this," she said quietly. That was the closest thing to honesty I was going to get. They needed it. So they were taking it. And leaving everything else behind. The morning they left, the house felt hollow. Suitcases rolled across the floor, zippers closed, car doors slammed. My father gave me a firm nod like we were handing off a shift. "You've got this," he said. My mother hugged Lily, holding on a second longer than usual, but not long enough. "We'll be back before you know it," she whispered. Lily smiled because that's what she did. "I'll be here," she said. They didn't look back when they drove away. I stood in the driveway until their car disappeared at the end of the street. Then I went inside. The first night, Lily tried to act normal. We watched an old movie we'd both seen a dozen times. She laughed at the right parts, even when I knew she was exhausted. "You don't have to sit with me all night," she said at one point. "I'm okay." I shook my head. "I've handled worse watches," I said. That made her smile a little. "You always say that." "Because it's true." But this wasn't the same. Out there you trained for what might happen. Here you watched something you couldn't fight. The routine started the next morning. Dialysis appointments, medication schedules, phone calls with insurance reps who spoke in circles. I learned how to read her lab results, how to adjust her diet, how to recognize the subtle signs that something wasn't right. I set alarms for everything. I didn't miss a single one. At night, I sat at the kitchen table with stacks of paperwork spread out in front of me. Bills, statements, denials. My parents texted occasionally. Pictures of landmarks, smiling faces in front of fountains and old buildings. "Thinking of you both," my mother wrote once, followed by a heart emoji. I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. A week in Lily had a bad day. She could barely make it from the car to the front door. I caught her before she fell. "I'm okay," she insisted, even as her knees buckled. "You don't have to say that," I told her quietly. She leaned against me, her weight lighter than it should have been. "I just don't want to be a burden," she whispered. The word hit harder than anything else. "You're not," I said firm. "You're not a burden." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully believe it. That night, I stayed awake in the chair beside her bed, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, counting each one like it mattered. Because it did. 2 weeks in, the doctor called me into his office. He didn't waste time. "Her condition is progressing faster than we hoped," he said. I kept my face neutral. "What are our options?" He folded his hands. "A transplant would give her the best chance. And if that doesn't happen?" He hesitated. "Then we manage symptoms, keep her comfortable." "Comfortable?" I nodded once. "Run the compatibility tests," I said. He looked at me carefully. "For you?" "Yes." The test results came back 3 days later. I was a match. I sat in my truck in the hospital parking lot, the paper in my hand. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a line I couldn't step back from. I thought about calling my parents, about telling them, about giving them a chance to come home. I picked up my phone. Then I put it back down, because I already knew what they would say. "Wait. Let's talk about this. Don't do anything drastic." They had already made their choice. Now I was making mine. That night I sat beside Lily's bed again. She was half asleep, her voice soft. "You're still here," she murmured. "Yeah," I said. She smiled faintly. "I knew you would be." I swallowed the words catching in my throat. "Always," I said. The next morning I walked into the hospital and signed the consent forms. No hesitation. No second call. Just a pen, a line, and a decision. Because some things don't wait for permission. The consent forms were still warm from my hand when I stepped out of the hospital and into the late afternoon light. The air smelled like cut grass and hot pavement. Across the parking lot, a young couple stood beside a minivan arguing quietly over a car seat. An older man in a baseball cap pushed his wife's wheelchair toward the entrance with the slow patience of someone who had done it for years. Life was moving all around me in ordinary ways, and for one brief moment I had the strange thought that the world should have stopped. It hadn't. I sat in my truck, closed the door, and laid my forehead against the steering wheel. I was a match. Not just a possibility, not just hope floating in the vague language doctors use when they don't want families to fall apart in front of them. A match. The transplant coordinator had walked me through the steps in a calm, practiced voice. More tests, clearance, surgery dates, risks, recovery, the impact it might have on my military future. All of it laid out plainly without drama. I appreciated that. At my age and after the life I'd lived, I had learned that the quiet facts were usually more frightening than raised voices. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. For one foolish second I thought it might be one of my parents. It was my mother, but not in the way I meant. She had posted another photo. This one was in front of a canal somewhere in Venice, smiling beneath a striped awning, a glass of white wine in her hand. My father stood beside her in sunglasses, looking relaxed in a way I had not seen in months, maybe years. The caption read, "Taking time to breathe. Everyone needs that sometimes." I stared at it until the screen went dark. Then I drove home. When I opened the front door, Lily was asleep in the recliner with a blanket around her shoulders, her face turned toward the window. The afternoon sun made her look younger than 30, almost like the little girl who used to sit on the porch steps and wait for me to come home from school. Her hair had thinned, her cheeks had hollowed. But when she slept, some small trace of that old softness came back. I set my keys down quietly and stood there a moment, just watching her breathe. The machine beside her clicked softly as it monitored her oxygen. The coffee table was covered in pill bottles, printouts, appointment cards, and a legal pad where I had started keeping track of everything: blood pressure, fluid intake, headaches, nausea, fatigue, insurance calls, prescription refills. I had turned our parents' living room into a care station. Not because I wanted to make a point. Because there had been no other choice. Lily woke when the floor creaked under my boot. "You're back," she said, pushing herself up slowly. "Yeah." "How'd it go?" I hesitated just long enough for her to notice. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That look usually means I'm not going to like the answer. It means I'm thinking. Same thing when it comes to you. I almost smiled. I took the chair across from her and leaned forward, resting my forearms on my knees. They ran more tests. And I'm a match. She went very still. For a second, she didn't seem to understand the words. Then I watched them land. "No," she said immediately. "Lily. Number." Her voice wasn't loud, that made it harder. "You are not doing that. I already said yes to the next round of evaluation." She shook her head, eyes shining now. "That's not your decision to make by yourself." "It is my kidney." "That isn't what I mean." I looked down at my hands. "I know." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself as if the room had suddenly gone cold. "You just got back," she said. "You have your career, your health, your whole life ahead of you. And so do you." "No," she said so softly I barely heard it. "Not like you." That was the first time she had spoken her fear out loud. Not in statistics, not in doctors' phrases, not in cheerful little lies. Just the truth. I got up and moved to the couch beside her. "Look at me," I said. She did. "We are not going to talk like you're already gone." She tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "You can't save everybody." "No," I said, "but I can help you, and I will." She lowered her eyes. "What if something happens to you?" "It won't." "You don't know that." She was right. I did know risk. I knew that better than most people. Every career decision I had made since I was young had come with some version of it. That didn't make me reckless. It made me clear-eyed. "I know enough," I said. "And I know this much: I'm not going to sit here and watch you fade away while I wait for Mom and Dad to finish eating pasta in Italy." At that, Lily flinched, not because of my tone, but because I had said what both of us had been trying not to say. She swallowed hard. "Maybe they just couldn't handle it." I turned and looked at her. "Is that really what you think?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The truth was, I had spent half my life making excuses for our parents. So had Lily. Dad worked hard. Mom was overwhelmed. Things were complicated. Money was tight. Stress does strange things to people. Nobody's perfect. All those explanations had a little truth in them. That was what made them useful. But there comes a point in life when age strips away the luxury of soft language. You stop saying people were confused when they were selfish. You stop saying they were tired when they were absent. You stop saying they meant well when what they did caused harm. Lily looked over at the framed family photo still sitting on the bookshelf. It had been taken at a church picnic years ago. Dad in a short-sleeved button-down. Mom laughing at something off camera. Lily and me standing on either side of them. We had looked like the kind of family people trusted. "Do you think they'll come back if I get worse?" she asked. The question was so gentle it nearly undid me. I kept my voice even. "They're coming back." "That's not what I asked." I leaned back and stared at the opposite wall. "No," I thought. "No, I don't. Not in the way that matters." But I couldn't say that to her, not when she was already carrying enough. So I said, "I'm here." She gave a small nod, the kind people give when they hear the answer behind the answer. That evening I made her broth and toast, though she only managed a few bites. Afterward, I sat at the kitchen table and spent nearly 2 hours on the phone with the insurance company being transferred from one department to another, explaining the same thing in 6 different ways. By the end of the call, they had denied coverage for a medication her nephrologist had marked urgent. I wrote down the appeal instructions, thanked the woman on the phone, even though neither of us meant it, and hung up. Then I opened the stack of mail. Utility bill. Hospital statement. Lab invoice. Another hospital statement. The numbers blurred for a moment. I got up, walked to the garage, and stood beside my truck in the dim light. Then I looked over at my second vehicle, an older SUV I had kept because it was practical, dependable, and already paid off. The next morning I sold it. The man who bought it was decent enough. He asked if I was sure. I told him yes. He counted out a cashier's check in front of me on the hood and shook my hand. I thanked him, signed the title, and watched him drive away in a vehicle I had planned to keep another 10 years. That money paid for medications, home equipment, and part of Lily's outstanding balance. It also bought me something I needed more than pride. Time. That night after dialysis, Lily was so exhausted she could barely lift her head from the seat. I helped her into bed, adjusted her blanket, and turned off the lamp. At the door, I heard her say my name. I turned back. "You shouldn't have to do all this," she whispered. I thought about my parents under European lights, about their photographs, their captions, their easy smiles. Then I looked at my sister. "Maybe not," I said, "but I'm the one here." She closed her eyes, and I stayed in the hallway a long time after the room had gone quiet. Because being the one who stays does something to a person. It doesn't make you noble. It doesn't make you stronger than everyone else. It just leaves you without the luxury of pretending you didn't know what had to be done. 3 mornings later, the transplant coordinator called while I was standing in the laundry room folding towels. Her voice was calm and matter-of-fact. "We'd like to move you into the next phase of testing," she said. "Cardiac clearance, imaging, blood work, surgical consult. If everything holds, we can begin talking about dates." I looked through the doorway into the living room where Lily was asleep in the hospital bed we had rented 2 days earlier. That bed was what my parents had seen when they came home. That bed was the first thing that had made my mother lose her breath. At the time, I hadn't known it would come to that. But once Lily started having trouble making it from the recliner to the bathroom without stopping to rest, I knew the house needed to change. The delivery men had been respectful, quiet, efficient. They moved out my father's leather chair, set up the bed by the front window, plugged in the oxygen unit, showed me how to work the rails, then left me standing in the middle of the living room with a clipboard and a receipt. I signed my name and realized not for the first time that a person can watch their whole family shift shape without a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it happens through paperwork, through rented equipment, through meals gone cold on the kitchen counter because somebody is too tired to eat them. "I can come in this afternoon," I told the coordinator. "That works," she said. "And Lieutenant?" I still wasn't used to hearing my rank in a medical setting. "Yes. You should know the surgeons will talk to you very plainly. This is not a minor decision." "I know." When I hung up, I stood there a moment with a towel in my hands, listening to the hum of the dryer and the oxygen machine in the next room. Then Lily woke and called my name. By the time I got to her, she had pushed herself halfway upright and was trying not to look winded. "You okay?" I asked. "Just thirsty." I handed her the cup with the bendable straw, and she took a few slow sips. "You've got your serious face on," she said. "That doesn't narrow it down much." "It does when you're trying to pretend everything's fine." I sat on the edge of the chair beside the bed. "Hospital called, more testing." She let that settle between us. "For the transplant?" "Yes." She looked toward the front window at the strip of neighborhood visible between the curtains. Mrs. Donnelly from next door was walking her beagle. A delivery truck slowed near the mailbox. Somewhere down the block, a lawn mower started up. "Normal life moving on schedule." Lily's voice came out quiet. "You really aren't waiting for them, are you?" "Number." Her eyes returned to mine. "Have you even told them?" I didn't answer fast enough. "That means no," she said. "I haven't told them yet." "You should." "Why?" Her face tightened. "Because they're still our parents." I leaned back and looked at her for a long moment. There it was again, that reflex both of us had grown up with. The reflex to preserve their place in the story even when they had stepped out of it themselves. "They know you're getting worse," I said. "They know I'm here alone with you. They know the bills are piling up. They know what dialysis means. That's not the same as knowing you're about to give up a kidney." "No," I said, "it isn't." She lowered her gaze. "And if you tell them after it's done," she said, "it'll feel like punishment." That word stayed with me long after she drifted back to sleep. Punishment. I didn't want punishment. Punishment was loud, personal, hot-blooded. What I wanted was harder to explain. I wanted truth laid out where it couldn't be stepped around. I wanted a reckoning that wasn't built on shouting, because shouting gives selfish people something to hide behind. They can always say emotions got out of control. They can call it a misunderstanding, a bad day, a tragic overreaction. No. I wanted them to face facts so plain and orderly that there would be no room left for excuses. That afternoon, I took Lily to dialysis, waited through the session, then drove straight to the hospital for my own appointments. The surgical consult was on the 4th floor in an office that smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic. The surgeon was older than I expected. Silver hair, steady hands, wedding ring worn thin from years. He had the kind of face that told people the truth for a living. He reviewed my chart, then looked at me over his glasses. You understand this could affect your future service? Yes. You understand recovery can be complicated even when the surgery goes well? Yes. And you understand, he said, that donors sometimes minimize what they're giving because they're focused on the person they love. I sat still. With respect, doctor, I said, I'm not minimizing anything. He held my gaze a moment longer, then nodded once. Good, he said, because I'm not here to talk you out of it. I'm here to make sure you know what it costs. There was something almost comforting in that. Not because the cost was small, but because he didn't insult me by pretending otherwise. He walked me through incision sites, pain management, expected limitations, possible complications. Then he set the folder down and folded his hands. Do you have support at home? I almost laughed. Not the kind you mean. He must have seen something in my expression because he didn't press. He simply wrote a note in the file. When I left the hospital, the sun was already going down. My phone buzzed just as I reached the parking garage. This time it was my mother calling. I stood there for a second, looking at her name on the screen. Then I answered. Hi, sweetheart, she said with a brightness that felt almost aggressive. I could hear restaurant noise in the background, glassware, voices, music. Hi, Mom. We just finished dinner. Florence is beautiful. You would love it here. I said nothing. She seemed to notice the silence then. How's Lily? Tired. Oh, well, tell her we miss her. Miss her. I shut my eyes for a moment. She's not a summer house, I said. You don't miss her. You left her. My mother's voice dropped. That's not fair. No. We needed some time, she said. Your father and I were falling apart. And leaving your daughters fixed that. She inhaled sharply. Why are you being like this? Because someone had to be. Instead, I said, I'm taking Lily to appointments. I'm handling the bills. I'm handling the house. I'm handling everything. We appreciate that, she said quickly. That almost made me laugh. Do you? Yes, of course. Enough to come home. Silence. In the background, I heard a man speaking Italian to another table. My mother lowered her voice as if that made the moment private. We're already halfway through the trip. I looked out across the garage at the evening sky turning dark over the city. There it was. The truth again, not hidden, not even dressed up much. Already halfway through the trip. Not, is she worse? Not, what do the doctors say? Not, do you need us? Just the trip, its schedule, its inconvenience, its importance. I'm a donor match, I said. The line went silent. What? For Lily. My mother did not speak for a full 3 seconds. Then she said exactly what I had known she would say. Don't do anything drastic. We'll talk when we get back. I stared at the concrete floor. When you get back, I repeated. Yes, please, just wait. That word settled something in me. Wait. Wait while Lily faded. Wait while they finished dessert. Wait while they returned to their own lives slowly and on their own terms. No, I said. My mother's breath caught. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm done waiting. Before she could answer, I ended the call. I stood in that parking garage, a long time, phone still in my hand, feeling not rage, but a cold, clarifying stillness. When I got home, Lily was awake in the living room bed with the lamp on low. She looked at my face and immediately knew something had happened. You told her. I did. And I took off my jacket and set it over the chair. And she told me not to do anything drastic. Lily closed her eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I'm sorry. I walked over and adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. This isn't yours to be sorry for. The next morning, I went back to the hospital and signed the final consent to proceed. Not because I was fearless. Because some decisions become clearer the longer other people avoid making theirs. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday. They told me to arrive before dawn. No food after midnight. Clear liquids only. Bring a list of medications. Arrange for someone to drive me home. I nodded through all of it like I was being briefed for an operation. Only this time I wasn't stepping into it alone. Or at least that's what I told myself. The night before, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote everything down. Passwords, account numbers, insurance contacts, the name of Lily's nephrologist, her medication schedule in case something went wrong and someone else had to step in. I even wrote down the name of the neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, and her phone number in case Lily needed help while I was still in the hospital. I wrote like I was preparing for absence. Not because I expected the worst, but because I had spent enough years in uniform to know that hoping things go right is not the same as planning for when they don't. Around 10, Lily shuffled into the kitchen wrapped in her blanket. "You're still up," she said. "So are you." She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly. "What are you writing?" "Just making sure things are covered." Her eyes moved over the pad. "That's a lot of just." I set the pen down. "It's nothing you need to worry about." "That's not how this works anymore," she said gently. "We don't get to decide what the other one worries about." She was right. We hadn't been living that way for weeks. I leaned back in the chair. "Surgery's at 6 in the morning," I said. She nodded once like she had been bracing for the confirmation. "And you didn't tell them again," she said. "Number." "Not even after the call." "Number." She exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking maybe they'll show up at the last minute," she said. "Like in those movies where someone runs through the airport and realizes what matters." I almost smiled. "This isn't a movie." "I know." She looked down at her hands. I don't want you to go through this without them knowing." "I'm not going through it without someone knowing," I said. She looked up. "I know," I added, "you know." Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I wish it was me," she whispered. I shook my head. "I don't." At 4:30 in the morning, the house was silent. I moved carefully, not turning on any more lights than I needed. The routine felt familiar, like early deployments, like quiet departures before anyone else was awake. I paused in the doorway of the living room. Lily was asleep, the soft rise and fall of her chest steady under the blanket. The oxygen machine hummed beside her, a constant low note that had become part of the house. I stood there longer than I meant to. Then I walked over and adjusted the blanket the way I had done every night. "Hey," she said suddenly, her voice rough with sleep. I froze. "You're supposed to be asleep," I said. "So are you." I crouched beside the bed. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." She reached out her hand, finding mine. "You come back," she said. It wasn't a question. "I will." "You promise?" I met her eyes. "I promise." She held on for a second longer, then let go. "Go," she said softly, "before I change my mind." Mrs. Donnelly was waiting in her robe when I stepped outside. "I'll sit with her," she said, as if we had done this 100 times before. You worry." "Thank you." She waved me off like it was nothing. "Go on now." I drove to the hospital in the dark, the streets nearly empty. When I pulled into the parking lot, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Inside, everything moved in quiet efficiency. Paperwork. Vitals. A nurse with kind eyes who explained each step even though I already understood most of it. They gave me a hospital gown and a plastic bracelet. "Any last questions?" she asked. I thought about it. "Number." She smiled gently. "That's usually a sign someone's already made up their mind." I lay back on the narrow bed as they wheeled me toward the operating room. The ceiling lights passed overhead one by one. For a moment I let my eyes close. Not in fear. Just in stillness. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the quiet of the house. A different kind. Controlled, measured, clinical. The second thing was the pain. It wasn't sharp. Not at first. More like a deep, heavy pressure that reminded me something had changed inside me. A nurse leaned over. "You're in recovery," she said. "Surgery went well." I nodded slightly. "Your sister is stable," she added. That was the only part that mattered. The next few days blurred together. Pain medication. Short walks down the hallway. Doctors checking incisions. Nurses adjusting IV lines. I learned to move carefully, to sit up without pulling too hard, to breathe through the discomfort instead of fighting it. Lily was in a different room, but they let me see her once I was stable enough to be wheeled over. She looked pale, smaller than ever. But she was awake. "Hey," she said when she saw me. "Hey." Her voice was stronger than I expected. "You did it." "So did you." She smiled faintly. "You always did like being the overachiever." I almost laughed, but the movement pulled at my side and reminded me not to. We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. There was a kind of understanding that didn't require words. On the third day, I asked for my phone. The nurse hesitated. Just for a few minutes, I said. She handed it to me. There were messages from my unit. A few from distant relatives. Nothing from my parents. I wasn't surprised. I scrolled past everything and opened the folder where I had been saving documents. Hospital bills. Receipts. Insurance denials. Every call I had logged. Every expense I had covered. Every piece of proof that showed exactly what had happened while they were gone. Not anger. Not revenge in the way people usually mean it. Something quieter. Something more permanent. A record. When they discharged me, Mrs. Donnelly drove me home. "You just rest," she said as she helped me out of the car. "I'll keep an eye on your sister until you're steady on your feet. I appreciate it." "Of course you do," she said, smiling. "Because you were raised right." I didn't answer that. Inside the house felt different. Not empty. Not heavy. Just changed. The hospital bed was still by the window. The paperwork was still on the table. But there was something else now. A kind of quiet certainty. I lowered myself carefully into the chair and looked around the room. At everything that had happened. At everything that had been done. And at everything that had been missed. Because while my parents had been walking through old cities and taking pictures under foreign lights, life here had not paused. It had moved forward. Without them. The first morning back home, I woke before the alarm. Habit. For a second I forgot where I was. Then the ache along my side reminded me, not sharp, just a steady pull that told me to move carefully to respect what had been done. I sat up, slowly waited for the room to settle, then stood. The house was quiet. Not the heavy quiet from before, not the kind that pressed in on your chest. This was different. Measured, intentional. The kind of quiet that comes after something has already been decided. Lily was awake when I reached the living room. She had pushed herself up against the pillows, a book open in her lap. She clearly wasn't reading. "You're up," she said. "So are you." She gave a small smile. I slept. That's good. It was more than good. It was the first time in weeks she had said it without adding a little or not much. I checked the machine, her vitals, the medication schedule I had taped to the side table. All steady. For the first time in a long while, there wasn't an immediate problem to solve. That didn't mean things were easy. It just meant they were moving in the right direction. Recovery is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small things. Lily asking for toast instead of just water. Walking from the bed to the kitchen without needing to stop halfway. Sitting up a little longer each day. Laughing once, really laughing at something on television. Each of those moments mattered more than anything else. By the end of the week, I was able to move through the house without bracing myself against the wall. Slowly. Deliberately. The kind of pace that forces you to notice everything. The sunlight through the front window. The way the floorboards creak near the hallway. The stack of unopened mail still sitting where I had left it. I brought it to the table and started sorting. Bills. More bills. Statements. And then something else. A notice from the mortgage company. I read it twice. Then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I wanted to make sure I did. That afternoon I called the number listed. The man on the other end sounded tired in the way people do when they've had the same conversation too many times. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "There are outstanding balances, several missed payments." Missed by who, I asked. There was a pause as he checked. "By the account holders," he said. "Your parents." I looked out at the living room, at the hospital bed, at Lily sitting quietly with a blanket around her shoulders. They told me everything was current. I can only tell you what I see here. How long has it been like this? 3 months. 3 months. Before they left. Before the trip. Before they said they needed space. I thanked him, ended the call, and sat there for a long time. Not shocked. Not even angry. Just clear. That night I went through every document in the house. Bank statements. Loan records. Insurance papers. What I found wasn't chaos. It was worse. It was quiet neglect. Late payments. Deferred notices. Minimum balances met just enough to avoid immediate consequences. A slow drift toward a problem they hadn't intended to solve. And then, they left. The next morning I called a lawyer. Not because I wanted a fight. Because I wanted to understand what could be done. His office was downtown in a building that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. The trip. The medical bills. The missed mortgage payments. The surgery. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "And your goal?" he asked. "I don't want to lose the house," I said. "And I don't want this situation to keep repeating itself." He nodded. "Are you prepared to take financial responsibility?" "I already have." "That's not the same as legal responsibility." I held his gaze. "I am." He studied me for a moment longer, then opened a folder. "There are options," he said, "but they require documentation. Proof of payment, proof of care, proof that you've been the acting responsible party." "I have all of that." "I thought you might." Over the next few days, I gathered everything. Receipts. Hospital bills. Records of payments. Logs of calls. Dates. Times. Details. Not out of anger. Out of precision. Because if there is one thing I learned in uniform, it's that clarity wins where emotion fails. Lily watched me one evening as I organized the paperwork into folders. "You're building a case," she said. "I'm building a record. For them. For the truth." She was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like something that could hurt." "It might. And you're okay with that." I set the folder down and looked at her. I'm okay with them finally seeing what they chose not to look at. A message came in from my mother that night. A picture. Another restaurant. Another caption. "Can't wait to come home and relax after this trip." Relax. I stared at the word. Then I set the phone face down on the table. 2 days later, another message. "We land tomorrow." No questions. No acknowledgement. Just information. Like they were returning from something routine. Like nothing had changed. I stood in the living room that evening looking at everything. The hospital bed. The medication station. The folders stacked neatly on the table. The house that had been held together by decisions they hadn't made. And I realized something. This wasn't about catching them off guard. It wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was about letting them walk back into the life they had left. And seeing it exactly as it had been. Without explanation. Without protection. Without anyone softening it for them. The next morning I helped Lily sit up a little straighter. "They're coming home today," I said. She nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been gone a long time," she said, "even though I never left." I understood that. More than she knew. By the afternoon the house was ready. Not staged. Not arranged. Just honest. Every bill in place. Every record visible. Every consequence waiting quietly where it belonged. And when I heard the sound of tires in the driveway, I didn't move. Because some moments don't need preparation. They just need truth. I heard the car doors before I saw them. Then came the scrape of suitcase wheels over the driveway, the quick murmur of my mother saying something I couldn't make out, and my father's heavier steps on the front walk. Inside the house, the oxygen machine hummed softly by the window. Lily sat propped up in the hospital bed, a pale blue blanket over her lap, her hands folded so tightly I could see the strain in her fingers. She had wanted to go back to her room before they arrived. I had asked her once if that was what she really wanted. "No," she said after a long pause. "If they're going to see it, they should see it." So she stayed. I stood near the coffee table, not in the center of the room, not posed, just present. The front door opened. My mother stepped in first, carrying a handbag, and wearing the same travel smile people bring home from vacations, the smile that says they expect to be welcomed back into the lives they paused. My father came in behind her with 2 suitcases, and the stiff, tired posture of a man already annoyed by airports. Then they looked up. Everything after that happened quietly. My mother's suitcase slipped from her hand and tipped over on its side. One wheel spun in the air for a second before stopping. My father's grip stayed on the handle of the larger case, but his shoulders seemed to lock in place. The room was not what they had left. My father's recliner was gone. In its place was the rented hospital bed with the rails half raised. A portable oxygen unit stood beside it. Medication trays lined the side table. A chart hung from a clipboard. Bottles, receipts, appointment summaries, and organized folders covered the coffee table. And Lily, thin, weak but alive, was sitting in the middle of all of it. My mother's eyes moved over the room, then to Lily, then to me. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be happening." My father set the suitcase down slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might make the scene worse. "What is all this?" he asked. Neither Lily nor I answered. My mother took a step toward the bed, then another. "Lily, honey." Lily looked at her, not cruelly, not warmly either, just tired. "You came back," she said. The words were simple, but the way she said them made my mother's face tighten. My father looked at the bed, then the oxygen unit, then the folders on the table. "Why is there a hospital bed in my living room?" That was the first thing he chose to say. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Not, "Why didn't anyone tell us?" Just ownership. My living room. I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. Because she couldn't make it to her bedroom anymore. He stared at me. My mother put a hand to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I said evenly while you were in Europe, Lily got worse." My mother shook her head. No, you said she was tired. You never said..." I said enough. The words came out calm. That seemed to unsettle them more than anger would have. My father frowned. "Why didn't you tell us it had gotten this bad?" I turned slightly and picked up the top folder from the coffee table. "I did," I said. "You just didn't ask the right questions." Silence. I opened the folder and removed a stack of papers clipped together. "This is her dialysis record for the month you were gone," I said, laying it on the table in front of them. "These are the medication changes. These are the insurance denials. These are the home equipment invoices. And these," I set down a second stack, "are the missed mortgage notices that started before you left." My father's face changed then. Not guilt, not yet. Recognition. He knew exactly what I had found. My mother looked from one pile to the next, her breathing starting to quicken. "I don't understand," she said. "You understood enough to leave," I said. My father's jaw set. "Watch your tone." I looked at him. That old reflex was still alive in him. The need to shift the ground to make this about respect instead of truth. "No," I said, "not today." The room went still. Even Lily lifted her head a little more at that. My mother sank slowly onto the edge of the couch like her legs no longer trusted her. "We just needed some time," she said weakly. "Your father and I were exhausted. Everything in this house had become so heavy." I nodded once. "Yes," I said, "it had." She looked at me with wet, bewildered eyes as if I had somehow failed to be sympathetic to the burden of her own absence. My father stepped toward the table and picked up one of the notices. "These payments." "We're late for 3 months," I said, "before you ever boarded a plane." He dropped the paper back onto the stack. "I was handling it." "No," I said, "you were avoiding it." His face reddened. "You don't know everything." I almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're right," I said. "I only know what I paid. I only know what I signed. I only know what she went through while you were drinking wine in Italy." My mother flinched. My father took one more step toward me. "That's enough." "No," Lily said quietly. All three of us turned toward her. She was sitting a little straighter now, one hand pressed lightly to the blanket over her lap. "That's enough," she repeated, looking at our father. "For once, just let her finish." I had not heard that tone from Lily in years, maybe ever. It seemed to take something out of him. He stopped moving. I reached for the last folder. This one was thinner. "More final." "I was a donor match," I said. My mother blinked. "What?" "For Lily." Neither of them spoke. "I found out while you were gone." My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father's voice was lower when it came. "What are you saying?" I held his gaze. "I'm saying the surgery happened 2 weeks ago." My mother made a small broken sound and looked at Lily as if searching her face for contradiction. Lily did not give it. Then my mother looked at me. "At you." Her eyes dropped to the way I was standing, careful without being obvious, one side still protected by instinct. "No," she said again, shaking her head. "No." I set the folder on the table in front of them. Inside were the surgical records, discharge papers, and follow-up instructions. "I gave her my kidney," I said, "while you were gone." My mother pressed both hands to her mouth. My father had gone completely pale. For a moment, neither of them seemed able to connect the room they were standing in with the month they had just lived through. It was all there in front of them, the bed, the machines, the bills, the legal notices, the paperwork, the cost. Not imagined. Not exaggerated. Documented. Real. And then my mother said the words I had heard in my mind long before they ever arrived. No, this can't be happening. But it had happened. That was the thing. It had happened slowly, painfully, one ordinary day at a time while they were far away pretending life had asked too much of them. My father sank into the chair by the window as if all the strength had gone out of him. My mother was crying now, but softly, almost in shock. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I did not need to. Because the truth was sitting in the room with us. Breathing. Recovering. And looking back at them. Nobody said anything for a long time after that. The oxygen machine kept humming. A car passed outside. Somewhere down the block a dog barked once and went quiet again. It struck me then how ordinary the afternoon sounded, even with my mother bent forward on the couch in tears, and my father sitting by the window like a man who had suddenly aged 10 years. That is one of the strangest things about the worst moments in life. The world does not stop to honor them. It just keeps moving. My father was the first one to speak. His voice came out rough. You should have called again. I looked at him, and for one brief second I almost felt tired enough to laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was familiar. There it was, that last thin instinct to reach for a version of events that made him less responsible. Not innocent. He knew better than that now. But less responsible. The kind of sentence people use when the truth is too large to look at directly. You should have called again. You should have explained it differently. You should have made me understand. I leaned one hand against the table, careful of my side. No, I said quietly. You should have come home. He looked at me, and something in his face gave way. Not pride exactly. Something underneath it. My mother lowered her hands from her mouth, though her fingers were still trembling. She looked at Lily first. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. Oh, honey. Lily did not answer. She wasn't being cruel. She simply didn't seem to have anything left to offer that wasn't earned. My mother turned to me. Why didn't you tell us after the surgery? She asked. I thought about that. There are questions people ask because they want information. And there are questions they ask because they want a bridge back into a room they no longer know how to enter. I answered honestly. Because by then it wasn't information you needed, I said. It was consequences. That landed hard. My mother closed her eyes. My father stared at the papers on the table again as if he might find a version of them that hurt less. There wasn't one. After another long silence, Lily spoke. I really thought you'd come home, she said. She didn't say it loudly. She didn't say it to wound them. That was what made it unbearable. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before, not ordinary crying, not frustration, not even grief exactly. It was closer to shame. We were wrong, she said, voice shaking. We were so wrong. My father stayed still for a few more seconds. Then he stood, not all at once, but slowly, like it cost him effort to be inside his own body. He looked at Lily. Then at me. And finally he said the words I had waited my whole life to hear from him, though I had stopped expecting them years ago. I failed both of you. The room went quiet in a new way after that. I watched his face carefully, looking for the old signs, defensiveness, irritation, the need to explain. They were there at first, flickering around the edges. But they didn't take hold. He looked down at the missed mortgage notices, the hospital invoices, the surgical records. Then he looked at the rented bed in his living room. No, he said again, but this time to himself. No, I failed both of you. My mother moved from the couch to the side of Lily's bed and sank carefully into the chair beside it. Can I sit here? She asked. Lily gave a small nod. My mother reached for her hand but stopped just short, waiting. After a moment, Lily let her take it. That was the first grace offered in that room. Small, fragile, but real. My father turned toward me. What do I do now? He asked. For a second I saw the younger version of him in that question, the man who always wanted the practical next step, the immediate task, the thing that could be fixed with effort, if not feeling. In another season of life that would have irritated me. But age teaches you something about remorse. When it is real, it doesn't come dressed in perfect words. Sometimes it shows up clumsy and late and humiliated, asking what's left to do. So I answered him plainly. You pay what you owe, I said. You stop pretending things fix themselves. You show up, not for an afternoon, not when it's convenient. You stay. He nodded once. Then again. I will. I believed he meant it. That didn't mean I trusted it yet. Those are not the same thing. Over the next week, I watched what happened. My father canceled the rest of the travel arrangements they had planned for later that summer. I know because I heard him on the phone in the den, voice flat, saying, "No, we won't be rescheduling." He met with the mortgage company. He sold off an investment account he had been protecting for years and used the money to clear the back balance and bring the house current. He called the billing offices I had been dealing with, and for the first time in his life, let hold music punish him instead of leaving the burden to someone else. My mother changed in quieter ways. She learned Lily's medication schedule by heart. She wrote down blood pressure numbers in a notebook with careful handwriting. She sat through follow-up appointments and took notes without turning away from hard information. Twice I caught her standing in the hallway outside Lily's room late at night, one hand over her mouth, listening to make sure her breathing stayed steady. She cooked again too. Simple things at first. Soup, toast, soft eggs, the kind of food you make when you are trying to care for someone, not impress them. None of it erased what they had done. That is another thing age teaches you if you are willing to learn it. Real repentance does not erase the wound. It accepts that the wound is there and works anyway. My own recovery moved forward slowly. The pain eased, the stiffness lessened. By the third week, I could walk around the block without feeling that deep pull in my side. Lily got stronger too. Color began to return to her face. She started eating more. One afternoon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle, and for a second the sight of something so ordinary nearly brought me to tears. I stood in the doorway and watched her. What she asked, smiling a little. "Nothing," I said. "You're doing a crossword." Well, she said I thought I'd start with something ambitious. That made me laugh. A small laugh, but a real one. My mother looked up from the sink when she heard it. She didn't say anything. She just closed her eyes for a brief second, like hearing laughter in the house again was almost more than she could bear. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after my parents came home, we sat on the back porch together. Not because everything had been solved. Because the weather was good, and Lily wanted sunlight, and no one argued. My father sat across from me with a glass of iced tea sweating in his hand. He looked older than he had before Europe. Not weaker, just more honest. "I keep thinking about that sentence," he said. "What sentence?" He swallowed. "I'm the one here." I hadn't realized Lily had told him I said that. He nodded toward the house. "She said that's what you told her, over and over." I looked out over the yard. The grass needed cutting. The fence would need staining before winter. Mrs. Donnelly's beagle was barking at squirrels again on the other side of the hedge. "Normal things?" I said. My father nodded, eyes lowered. I should have been. That was the closest thing to an explanation he ever tried to offer. And maybe it was enough. Not because it balanced the scales. It never could. But because it was the truth without decoration. Lily leaned her head back against the porch chair and closed her eyes in the sun. "We're here now," my mother said softly. I looked at her. Her face held no defense in it, just hope and fear and the knowledge that both belonged there. "Yes," I said, "you are." And that was where reconciliation began, not with forgiveness spoken too quickly, not with one dramatic apology, not with tears alone. It began with staying, with paying attention, with learning late in life if necessary that love is not proven by what you feel when things are easy. It is proven